So Nintendo hasn't been doing too hot recently. Some people might argue that they're doing quite a lot better now that Donkey Kong Bananza is out, a big exclusive for the Nintendo Switch 2, and honestly, a really good game. I'd argue it's fantastic. And don't worry, you clicked on the right video. This is primarily a review of Donkey Kong Bananza, but I can't ignore the context around Bonanza and some of the reception of it, and that it is a game for the Switch 2. So give me just a second. Nintendo, maybe not in the best moment. Sure, when we look at their financials, it seems like people are happy pending upcoming results. We'll see how that is. And at least when it comes to the launch of the Switch 2, it's done absolute numbers, which I and a lot of other people attribute to other reasons, primarily the fact that there was stock of the Switch 2, like plenty of it, so everybody who wanted one could get one. But exactly how those sales will hold up over time given their new price point, that's a little bit more in question. Now, I would say that when it comes to overall sentiment from the customers, from us, Nintendo is pretty much at an all-time low. It's not just about the price of the Switch 2, it's about the price of Mario Kart World being $80. It's about the way that they're rolling out their online plan. It is how ridiculous Nintendo Switch Welcome Tour is. It's the whole scandal regarding them being able to brick your Nintendo Switch 2 if you don't comply with their rules, which has already gotten them into hot water in Brazil, and by the way, they can't actually brick it in the European Union. And it is of course worth mentioning that their lawsuit with Pocket Pair over Palworld seems to not be going well at all. But as I said at the very start, this is a video about Donkey Kong Bananza. So why am I talking about all of these things regarding Nintendo? Well, because as a reviewer, I found myself in a very difficult situation. So let me just put this out there up front. Donkey Kong Bananza is fantastic. It might be one of my favorite Nintendo games ever. Out of all the crazy things that Nintendo has done in the last year and a half, the craziest might be that they released a sequel to Mario Odyssey and didn't tell anybody because they called it Donkey Kong Bananza. And this is a game that's chock full of character, imagination, ingenuity, and of course, the charm that I've come to expect from Nintendo over years and years. A charm that I felt was just a tad bit missing from Mario Kart World, and that I feel is here in full force. I absolutely adore Donkey Kong Bananza, and in this video I'm going to talk about why I love it so much. I think it is important to talk about it, but I can't divorce the fact that Donkey Kong is a fantastic game from the company that's making it and how much I disagree with a lot of their decisions and the ways that they have chosen to treat their customers. And both things can be true at the same time. The people responsible for Bonanza can have made a fantastic game, but it's out on a console that's being developed and has constant decisions made around it by a company that right now I don't really support. And in case you're brand new to the channel, no, I am not a Nintendo doomer. The reason that I care and that I talk about these things is because I love Nintendo. I play video games because of Nintendo, and many of my favorite games of all time have been made by them. And it is precisely because I care so much that I criticize, because I want them to change, to do things differently, to do them better, to do the customer better. But along with that criticism, credit needs to be given where it's due, that they at least can still make really good games, which is, to many people, the only part that matters. It's just that, to me, the other parts matter as well. And that all leads to one very important question. Is Donkey Kong Bananza a system seller? And while by the end of this video you might have a different opinion than I personally think that it's not. Not because it's not that good of a game, but because the system that it's trying to sell you is one that I just don't think is worth it at the moment, even if it has this game in its catalog. And we will talk more about if there will be a time where I think the Switch 2 is a great purchase for you later on. So I'm going to give you my review of Donkey Kong Bananza. I am going to talk about Nintendo and their overall situation and about the Switch 2 in this video. And hi, I'm Mug, and if you're new here, welcome. And if you're not new here, welcome back. It's great to see you again. You are looking fantastic. Don't forget, Hot Gamer Summer is here and you're crushing it. If you enjoy the video at any point, make sure to hit the like button. And if you like the way that I cover the industry, news, reviews, previews, all sorts of things, wait until the end of the video, make sure you like what I do, and then subscribe. We're almost at 100,000 subscribers, which is crazy, but I think you get a plaque or something for getting there. So, every click is very deeply appreciated. Let's get into it. Oh, banana. So I think I already gave my perspective on what I suspect a lot of people's big question is about the system seller thing. And I said that the game is really good. How good is it? Well, to be honest, what specifically the Mario Odyssey team, at least a big part of it, has achieved with Bonanza is pretty mind-blowing. And as I said in the intro, it is in many ways a sequel to Mario Odyssey. Bonanza takes the traditional open level approach of platformers, think something like Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie, and changes just a little bit of its structure to be partially more linear, partially more open, and then adds a ton of creativity and mechanics on top of it, many of which also remind me of Breath of the Wild, to create a game that feels very familiar in all of the good ways, but also very innovative and bringing a ton of fresh ideas with a very unique and very well utilized gimmick in the complete destruction of the world. At the core of Donkey Kong Bananza is that destruction. Everything in the game and its voxel-based world has a certain strength level to it, and Donkey Kong can punch through pretty much everything, and he can rip pieces of the terrain out, use it as a weapon or as a tool to destroy more terrain. You can use it to surf on that terrain. You can even use those terrain chunks to solve puzzles or to double jump for a lot of different things, and in a traditional Nintendo fashion, as the game keeps going, more and more twists on the types of terrain and how you interact with them are added in. Some of these are the typical incredibly creative things that'll have you smiling from ear to ear, and some of them are just really well implemented mechanics that are just intuitive the instant you see them. However, what I think really sets Bonanza apart from other platformers and pretty much every other game of this type I've ever played is how it takes that freedom of being able to destroy everything and manipulate a lot of the world and tries to carefully control it, but not fully for a lot of the other parts of the game. When you give the player so much freedom over what they can do to the game world, once the player is used to it, what becomes more interesting is what limitations you can place on that game world in a way that feels organic and doesn't feel like you're suddenly stripping away that power from the player, and instead you're asking them to be more creative with it. And Bonanza manages to do that, in my opinion, really, really well. Not always perfect, but really well. Part of that is Bonanza's progression. While technically the game does just proceed straight on if you go from objective to objective kind of main mission mode style, the world is full of bananas everywhere for you to collect, very similar to the moons in Mario Odyssey. Now, in Odyssey, you needed to collect a ton of moons to progress, which is not the case here in Donkey Kong Bananza, and instead, those bananas are useful for leveling up. The more bananas you collect, the more skill points you get access to that you can level up a bunch of Donkey Kong's skills, many of which related to his transformations, which I'm not going to show all of them off because the pre-release footage, just in case you want to be surprised like I was. But for example, you can turn into Bonanza mode, which is just very big Donkey Kong that can break stuff better, but you can also turn into Ostrich mode, which allows you to flutter and glide in the air, or Zebra mode, which allows you to run faster and over certain terrain that would otherwise break. In this same way, you keep obtaining new powers that let you interact with the world in more creative ways, and you're incentivized to explore around the world in order to find these bananas and keep up with all the collectibles and all that sort of stuff so that you can unlock other things and you can get some other advantages, or you can buy nice fancy clothes for you and Pauline, which do come with stats and bonuses on them because I guess, platformer RPG is a thing, and I'm not saying that as a complaint. It's actually pretty fun. Child Pauline is here and sings, and that's really cool, and I think the character is actually charming, and a lot of the characters, including the bad guys here, the game has made me laugh out loud quite a few times, and I think that's rare, but it made me happy. In this way, as more limitations are placed on you, the player, there is also more freedom granted to you, and you can find ways to completely skip the intended routes of certain objectives by maybe just fluttering and gliding to a place because you have a longer flutter and a better glide because you decided to level those skills up. You can find ways of combining certain powers that will allow you to do some crazy things that are very clearly not the intended path, and you are not limited there. But Other times, the game will find ways to very carefully limit you and have you interact with what it wants you to do, but never in a way that I felt was overbearing, and instead it was just a fun little break from what is otherwise a lot of creativity in how you choose to spend your time exploring this very fun world. And in an opinion that I'm sure some people are going to disagree with, but hey, that's how the internet works, I like this game more than Mario Odyssey, and I think Mario Odyssey is like one of the greatest games ever made, and I just think I had more fun with Bonanza, and I enjoy playing it more. But overall, the part that I think is the coolest to me of Bonanza is that it actually feels like a next-gen Nintendo game. And I don't mean that because it harnesses the power of the Switch 2. I don't mean that because of technical specifications. I mean it more from the design perspective and the kind of language in design that Nintendo is using. The way that Bonanza carries over parts of Mario Odyssey while also kind of bringing with it some of the more emergent gameplay systems of something like Breath of the Wild. The way that a lot of the sound design in this game feels close to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, including somehow like the vibe of actually getting into the challenge rooms that you have in this game and the way that they're structured. Something about it just reminds me a lot of the shrines from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, just this little reprieve from the rest of the world, and you can focus in on just this one puzzle where you're much more limited. There are even parts of this game's design and aesthetic and feel that remind me of Splatoon, which is definitely for me one of the cooler modern Nintendo games. Like, I really enjoy what they did with the aesthetic and the world they created with Splatoon. And Bonanza seems to be combining so much of the aesthetics and the design language from all of these more recent Nintendo games and making a more cohesive whole of all of them in a way that feels to me like this is kind of Nintendo's new identity. This is the vibe that Nintendo is going for, and I can't say I dislike it because I love a lot of the things I just described, from Odyssey to Breath of the Wild to Splatoon to a lot of their other stuff, and the way that they found a lot of the cohesion within that makes me excited to wonder how the development pipeline currently is within Nintendo and where that might be headed. I always go back to when I believe Eiji Aonuma said that they wanted a new generation to work on Breath of the Wild, to reinterpret what Zelda was. And as a Zelda purist, I guess I can't be considered that anymore because I think Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are both incredible games. Some of my favorite games of all time. And as time keeps going on, I might even say that Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom are my favorite Zelda games, which I know, sacrilegious. To be fair, they're my favorite for very different reasons than the others. I don't know, it's complicated. And I am personally hoping that what Nintendo is doing now, what we're seeing with Bonanza and whatever they might be cooking for later, is in this style. Is this new, fresher take, a new image for Nintendo for a new generation that's very well done and not something that feels like they're trying to ignore the past, but instead just very much move into the future. Because, guys, I don't know if you know this, it's been a pretty long time since we had a Donkey Kong 3D platformer. But going back to that future image is where I need to talk about Nintendo as a company again, and on if you should buy a Switch 2. For as much as a lot of their games seem to be modernizing, the way that Nintendo keeps viewing customers and a lot of the market seems in many ways like they are regressing. The way that they are trying to exert control over the customer, or the way that they are trying to kind of limit what it is that you are entitled to with things like bricking the system, the just lack of self-awareness, of just goodwill towards the customer, and then the kind of terrible public perception that there is of them just kind of being mad at something like Palworld and trying to do something legal about it and not coming up with anything, really just feels so at odds when you play something like Bonanza that feels so fresh and so modern compared to what Nintendo seems to be representing as a company, which is something that is very stuck in their ways and unwilling to communicate or understand their customers, even on things like price points. And whether you care about all of those things or not, my answer towards if you should buy a Switch 2 because Donkey Kong Bananza exists is the same that it was when we had Mario Kart World. No, the only people that I would recommend buy a Switch 2 are people who have very heavily invested into their Switch 1. They have a huge catalog of games, a lot of digital games, a lot of stuff that carries over to the Switch 2, and they want to upgrade their hardware. As much as it might seem like a meme from time to time, yes, this is still feeling like a Switch Pro, except that now it has 2 exclusive games. And I've even said it to personal friends of mine who don't know that I do this on YouTube, who have asked me, should I buy a Switch 2? And I've told them, no, I don't think it's there yet. I think the price point is very high for a lot of people in many key areas, including the screen. I think the console itself is lacking. In my opinion, it's just not worth it because you're essentially paying for a slightly better console in some ways, slightly more awkward in others, but primarily for access to the Switch 2 exclusive games. That's what you're doing when you're buying a Switch 2. And the exclusives just aren't there yet. For as much as I love Bonanza, that doesn't mean it's a system seller because it's a hard system to recommend. Now, maybe in a year from now, we might have Metroid Prime 4 and we might have, inklings of a new Zelda or a new Mario game. That's what it's sounding like. Plus, who knows what other things Nintendo might cook up. And maybe at that point, yes. But like I've said before on the channel, by that point, we'll see if there is a price correction. We'll see if there is an announcement of maybe a Switch 2 Lite or something similar that caters to a different audience or targets maybe who you are if you haven't picked up a Switch 2 or if you're thinking about it. A lot of stuff can change until then, and I just don't think that the Switch 2 is a console that you should pick up, at least not now. When that changes, I'll let you know. I'll because I cover this stuff. That's what I do here on YouTube. That's why I have mine. So whenever something changes that I think allows me to recommend it, and whenever Nintendo kind of improves on some of the things that they're doing very poorly, I'll be here to report on. Which if you want to hear more about that, you can subscribe. It's the button down there. That'll make it more likely for my videos to show up. But I do news reviews and all sorts of things here on the channel. You can go check it out before you subscribe, just in case. Anyways, I've been Mug. Thank you so much for watching. It honestly means the world to me that you are. And a very special extra thanks to the members and patrons up on the wall who directly support the channel and everything that I do here. And remember that the most important thing, aside from Hot Gamer Summer, is to go out there and enjoy. Enjoy some great video games, have a good time. If you have a Switch 2, you probably bought Donkey Kong Bananza. And if you don't have a Switch 2 and you're not sure about it, just wait for now. There's way too many video games. You'll go find something. You're gonna have a great time. And as always, I'll see you again very soon.